Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and today doing a Nurse Burn deck profile. So I'm really excited to do this for you guys because this deck just got a major power boost off the last ban list, giving us cards like Upstart Goblin back to 3 and even giving us Snatch Steal, which is crazy in this deck. So without further ado, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of Notification Squad, and definitely check out the Patreon in the description below for all those awesome rewards. Like in your name, description, every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your Patreon. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So for the monsters, guys, we're going to start off with 3 copies of Dark Lord Nurse Reficule. This card is the most important card in the entire deck because any effect that would make your opponent gain life points inflicts the same amount of damage to them instead, which is insane for cards like Upstart Goblin that give your opponent 1,000 life points will instead do 1,000 points of burn damage to your opponent, which is just absolutely crazy. This card is our main boss monster that we're trying to get out on our side of the field as quickly as possible so we can do burn damage to our opponent to win the game. We then play a single copy of Dark Lord Ashel. Dark Lord Ashel is just a really good 1-of in the deck just to help us draw, and this card is a really good 1-of because it has the ability you can discard this card and a Dark Lord card to be able to draw 2 cards, which is the main effect we're using on this card all the time. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get in to the spells. So for the spells, guys, we're going to start with a single copy of Card of Demise. Card of Demise is definitely a 1-of in the build because we don't play a high monster count in this deck. And this card is really good because we want to be able to set 5, summon out our copy of Nurse Reficule, and then pass over to the opponent, and then activate all of our trap cards to be able to do burn damage to the opponent and win the game. And this card helps us just dig into the deck to draw until we have 3 cards in our hand, which is just really nice. Plus, you don't really special summon in this deck a lot, so this card can help out a lot in the build. We then play a single copy of Snatch Steal. It is insane that this card is back, and this card is just absolutely crazy in this deck because it lets you take control of an opponent's monster, and it also increases your opponent's life points by 1,000 during their standby phase. But if we have Nurse Reficule on our side of the field, they actually will take 1,000 points of damage, making this card even more broken, which is just absolutely crazy. This is really cool in this deck to be able to play this card and do 1,000 points of burn damage to the opponent while also taking control of an opponent's monster. We then play 3 copies of Banishment of the Dark Lords. Banishment of the Dark Lords is definitely a 3-of deck. It's basically the Rhoda for the build that lets you add any Dark Lord card you want from your deck to your hand, which is really good to be able to search out cards like Ashel and our copy of Dark Lord Nurse Reficule, which is just really cool about this card. We then play 3 copies of Upstart Goblin. Upstart Goblin is a crazy powerful burn card in this deck because it will let us draw a card, but it also does 1,000 points of burn damage to the opponent when we have our copy of Nurse Reficule on our side of the field, which is just really cool about this card. Plus, playing a 39 card deck is just really cool because these are 3 cards in the deck to make it 40, and these cards just say draw a card, which means they're basically just blank cards, which is really cool. But they're really good in this deck because they do that burn damage with Nurse Reficule. We then play 3 copies of Pot of Duality. Pot of Duality is really good in the decks. We're not special summoning. We really don't even use the extra deck at all. So this card is great to be able to just help us reveal the top 3 and then be able to add 1 to our hand just to help us dig into the deck for cards like our copies of Nurse and more cards to be able to burn the opponent with. We then play 3 copies of Pot of Desires. This card is just insane because it's a draw 2, which is why we're playing it in the build. And this card just helps out a lot. And it's insane this card is back at 3, but it's a really good card in this particular build just to help us dig into the deck, and we don't need every card in the deck, so this card just helps us out a lot to get us the exact cards that we need to be able to do burn damage to the opponent to win the game. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, guys, we're going to start off with 3 copies of Bad Reaction to Samochi. Bad Reaction to Samochi is basically a trap version of Nurse, and this card is just really good as a 3-of in the build to give us more access to cards that will do burn damage to your opponent when they would gain life points, and this card is just really good in the deck overall. We then play 3 copies of Trap Trick. Trap Trick is really good because it basically boosts up the number of trap cards we're playing in the deck so that any of our 2-ofs become 5-ofs and any of our 3-ofs become 6-ofs, which is just really, really good. The only thing that you have to watch out for with this card is your copies of Pot of Desires to banish your extra copies of the cards you want to set to your side of the field. We have so many options in the deck, it doesn't even matter with Trap Trick. So this card is just really good to help us get into our deck and get the exact card that we need to be able to do burn damage, but basically any of our trap cards will do, which is just really nice. So this card is a definite 3-of in the build. We then play 2 copies of Ring of Destruction. Ring of Destruction is a very awesome old school card that has the ability that during your opponent's turn, you target a face-up monster your opponent controls whose attack is less than or equal to their life points and destroy that face-up monster, and if you do, take damage equal to the original attack, then inflict damage to your opponent equal to the damage that you took, and you can only activate 1 of this card per turn. But it's a really good card to be able to pop a monster on the field while also doing burn damage to your opponent, and it's a really awesome old school card. We then play 2 copies of Secret Barrel. Secret Barrel is really good just to do additional burn damage to the opponent because it inflicts direct damage to your opponent's life points equal to the total number of cards in your opponent's side of the field and in your opponent's hand times 200. So usually if you're going to activate this during the beginning of your opponent's turn and they've just drawn a card, you're usually going to take about 1200 points of damage, which is really good just to help you close out games. We then play 3 copies of one of the most powerful cards in the entire deck, and that's going to be 3 copies of Gift Card. Gift Card is hilarious in this deck because this card gives your opponent 3000 life points, but with our copies of Bad Reaction to Samochi or our copy of Nurse on our side of the field, you're actually going to take 3000 points of damage for every copy of this card. If you can get 3 of these on the field and just flip them up, you're going to win the game, which is hilarious about this card, and it's a definite 3-of in the build. We then play 3 copies of the Paths of Destiny. The Paths of Destiny is really cool as a 3-of, as both players toss a coin once, and if a player's result is heads, they gain 2000 life points, and the player's result is tails, they take 2000 points of damage. But with our copies of Bad Reaction to Samochi and our copy of Nurse Reficule, it's one of those heads I win, tails you lose kind of situation where we're always going to get what we want out of this card. So it doesn't matter which path they pick, they're going to lose. We then play 3 copies of Try and Guess. Try and Guess is really cool as a 3-of because this card basically does 3000 points of burn damage to the opponent because if each player has an extract, you declare 1 extract monster card type between Fusion, Synchro, or XZ, and both players reveal their extract, and the player that has more cards in the declared type gains 3000 life points. But again, since we have Bad Reaction to Samochi and Nurse Reficule, our opponent's probably going to be taking 3000 points of damage with this card, which is just really cool. We then play 3 copies of an extremely spicy tech card that I love in this deck, and it's one of my favorite cards in the entire game because it's just funny and I love it. It's such an old school card. It's going to be 3 copies of Magic Cylinder. Magic Cylinder is hilarious in this deck because when your opponent attacks, it deflects the attack back at their life points, which is just really cool to be able to do. Plus, it's a super old school card that's just really funny to be able to play, especially when your opponent makes a really big monster, tries to swing into Nurse, and you flip this card up, and you do the last little bit of burn damage that you need to be able to win the game. This card is hilarious to be able to play. I absolutely love it, and it's just a really cool old school card that does burn damage to the opponent while also protecting our copy of Nurse. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, guys, I will tell you, you really don't super need the extra deck for this deck, but this is just some good options for you guys. And if you don't want to play an extra deck for this deck, you really don't have to, except for cards like Try and Guess. So you can basically just pick 15 cards and put in the extra deck however you want. But these are just some really good options that you can play for the extra deck. So we're going to start off with Condemned Dark Lord. Condemned Dark Lord is just a really good 1-of in the deck that just does come up every so often to help you gain life points, because once returned during your end phase, you gain 500 life points for each fairy monster on the field, which can help out every so often, but you're usually not going to summon anything from the extra deck, except for 1 card that we're going to get into later. We then play a single copy of Access Code Talker. You're probably not going to summon it, but it's still an option if you want to, if you can get there, with like 3 copies of Reficule and a copy of, like, I don't know, Snatch Steal, but it's still pretty good to be able to summon out if you can, to be able to pop multiple cards on the field, and it just gets absolutely massive. You can link climb into it, but it's very rare. We then play a single copy of Nightmare Unicorn to spin stuff, one copy of Nightmare Phoenix to pop spells and traps, a single copy of Nightmare Cerberus to pop monsters. These are pretty good options for Snatch Steal, since you can take control of an opponent's monster and then make these if you need to pop something on the field, like a Floodgate, which isn't super big for us because we're only summoning one monster anyways, or popping a monster, which again isn't super big because we're just going to do burn damage and not even worry about the monster. You can play a single copy of the Dark Charmer Gloomy. You summon this card every so often as well. This is one of the most popular cards that I summon out of the extract in this deck, and it's just every so often that you summon this so you can link climb, but it's still an okay option in the deck. We then play a single copy of Donner. Donner's really good because it does pop cards on the field, which is, I really think, one of the best link monsters in the entire extract that you can make. So you'll just pop anything that you need. We then play a single copy of Azala. Azala is also another option that you guys can play in the extract if you want to. We then play a single copy of IP Masquerena. IP is also another option that you can play in here if you want to. Again, since you don't super need the extract, these are just options for you guys. So you don't even have to play any of these. You can just play 15 random cards. We then play a single copy of Bagooska. Bagooska does come up every so often because you can throw this card in defense position and just do burn damage to the opponent with cards like Bad Reaction to Samochi. Then play a single copy of Exciton Knight just to board wipe the field. One copy of Dweller, because sometimes you will see that this card will be an auto win condition, so you can just activate this card or put this card on the field, which is really cool. One copy of number 60 just to help you dig into the deck, because this card can double the attack of a monster. It can let you bring a monster back from the graveyard, or it can let you draw to and discard a card. We then play a single copy of AA Zeus. AA Zeus is really good at board wiping the field, which this card does come up every so often because you can Snatch Steal an XZ away from the opponent. And then once you do, you just basically make Zeus after you swing with it, so it is an option. So I do recommend Zeus in the extract. This card is really, really good. We then finally play a single copy of Typhon. Typhon is actually the card that I will recommend to you guys. If you have it, play Typhon, because Typhon can come up in any deck that can summon a single monster. So this card is a card that I would highly recommend that if you guys are going to play an extract, play Typhon, because Typhon can come up extremely easily and is a really good control card, because this card is just extremely easy to summon out to your side of the field. All your opponent has to do is summon 2 extract monsters, then you make this, and then you swing, and then you can later in the duel, if you need to, make a copy of AA Zeus. And this card is just really good to be able to make, especially in burn decks like this, that you can protect it with Magic Cylinder, which is hilarious. And it's really, really good in just about any deck. So I recommend playing at least Typhon and Zeus in the extract, but these all are interchangeable. So if you want a more budget option, you can change them out for literally anything. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you enjoy this Nurse Burn deck. It's a very fun deck to be able to play, to be able to do burn damage to the opponent. And it's just a deck that I do play every so often because it's funny to be able to just basically flip up a bunch of trap cards to the opponent and be like, hey, I won. And it's just really insane how easy it is to be able to establish, especially with cards like Pod of Desires being back at 3, cards like Upstart Goblin being at 3, Snatch Steal being at 1, and then having cards like Pot of Duality, Card of Demise. There's just so many options in this deck just to dig into the deck to be able to get to this card. And you basically play it at like 6 anyways, because you have 3 of this and then 3 of Banishment, so it's so easy to get to. So that's it for this one, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.